And now it's such an honor for me. Some of you know Sidley from before, but Sidley Du Preez is going to share with us a very special story. And it's in light of this Youth Month that we are celebrating. And it's an opportunity for us to, I really love what she said about this. It's an opportunity for us to question what happens in the small moments before leadership becomes public. And so she's going to tell us her story about some deeply personal and thought-provoking conversation inspired by letters she wrote to political prisoners on Robben Island as a teenager. So welcome, Sidley.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for inviting me into this space. As we gather during Youth Month, I really want to begin with a story. Not a big public story, not a story from a stage, from Parliament, or from a history book. It's a small story. A story about a teenage girl, a few handwritten letters, and something she only understood years later. I grew up on the Cape Flats during the 80s, during the heart of apartheid. And when I was about 16, 17 years old, I became aware of political prisoners on Robben Island. Now, at that age, I wasn't thinking about being an activist. In fact, I wasn't a political activist. I wasn't trying to be brave. I wasn't imagining that anything I did would matter. And I remember wondering what it must feel like to be cut off from your family, from your community, from ordinary life. And so I began writing. I began writing simple letters, ordinary letters, letters that asked them how they were, letters where I shared my ordinary life with them. But more importantly, letters that said one thing: you have not been forgotten. Now, those letters didn't travel freely. They were opened, read, and stamped by the prison censor office before they could be delivered to the recipients. And that carried on for some time, until I felt drawn to visit Robben Island. I traveled there alone as a teenager. I would have to take 3 buses or taxis from the Cape Flats, Heideveld, to reach the harbor. Get on a dingy boat, certainly not the fancy catamarans that are around today. I remember the prison warders. I remember the fierce dogs barking. But I also remember that there was a human being who needed connection. So this carried on for a few years, 16, 17, 18. And then life moved on. I became an adult. I built a career. I became a wife and later a mother. And those letters faded into the background of my life. 3 decades later, one of the former prisoners, Jude, searched and found me on social media. We met again on Robben Island. He took me to the spaces where he had lived and worked as a prisoner. Yes, that was 16-year-old Sidley. Okay. So we met again on Robben Island, and he took me and showed me those spaces where he lived and where he worked, the kitchen that he was on duty during his time there. And then the most amazing thing happened. As we stood together inside his cell, he handed me a bundle of letters. Letters that he had kept for more than 3 decades. My letters that I had written as a teenager. He had kept them in office safes throughout his career. I asked him, I said, why did you keep all these letters and for all these years? And his answer was simple. He said to me, Sidley, during my darkest moments, I would turn around and pick up one of your letters, and it would put a smile on my face. Now, I want to pause there for a sec. Because, you see, when I was 16 years old, I didn't think those letters mattered so much. I had no idea that they would survive. I had no idea that something that honestly felt so small at the time, to me it felt so small. It was an ordinary thing that I was doing. I was writing to my friend. But that something like that, such a small act, could become part of someone's survival. And so that moment really changed how I understand courage. It changed how I understand leadership. Because I believe leadership begins before we are given power. It changed how I understand the choices we make when we are young, when we are uncertain, and not yet powerful. And like I said, we often think that leadership begins when you are given a title, when you are elected, when you are promoted, when you are appointed, and when you are recognized. But I've come to understand that leadership begins much earlier. It begins before power, before recognition, and before applause. Before anyone is watching, in those small moments, those moments when you choose kindness over indifference, when you choose courage over comfort, responsibility instead of silence, human connection instead of distance. And so, Youth Month is often framed around the courage of young people in 1976, and rightly so. But the question I have is, if we only remember courage as something from the past, we may miss the forms of courage required from us now. Because courage today may look different. It may look like a young person refusing to become cynical. It may look like voting when trust is low. It may look like asking better questions. It may look like choosing not to humiliate someone online. It may look like challenging violence, corruption, and cruelty in the small spaces before it becomes public failure. It may also look like an older person listening properly to a young person without always correcting them. It may look like a community deciding that leadership is not only the responsibility of those in office. And so, the question that I carry with me in my work today is, what happens in the moments, those small moments, before leadership becomes public? Because you see, by the time leadership becomes visible, many choices have already been made. Character has already been shaped. Habits have already been formed. Courage has either been practiced or avoided. And this is not only a question for young people, it's a question to all generations. You see, young people need examples. But older generations also need humility. Young people need guidance, but older generations also need to listen. Young people need to be challenged, but they also need to be trusted with responsibility even before they have perfect answers. So I don't want this morning to be just a talk. I want it to be a space where we can reflect on a few questions that I've prepared, because in this space, both here and online, we have wisdom. We have experience. We have hope and disappointment. So let's not only speak about young people, let's speak with each other. Okay, so my first question that I'd like us to reflect on is, can you think of a small act of courage, either your own or someone else's, that mattered more than anyone realized at the time? Can you think of a small act of courage, either your own or someone else's, that mattered more than you realized at the time?
I'll get us started, and some of you know I was on holiday this week, and I was in a brand new area that I didn't know very well, and Vicki and I got completely lost, and we were trying to find our way around, and we just randomly picked some woman to ask us the directions back to where we needed to go, and this woman didn't know us, didn't have any other idea than we asked to go back to this particular location. And not only did she point us in the right direction, she said, let me walk with you. And in that walk, we asked her some questions because she actually lived in the area and knew it well. And she was so open and inviting. And the entire interaction must have been less than 5 minutes. But at the end, I took her number, and I just, even today, I think about how grateful I was that all she was doing was giving us directions, and that's all she needed to do. But in that little act of kindness, she walked us there, and she answered our questions with such generosity and kindness that it left a lasting impression in my mind. So it can be as little as just simply giving somebody 5 minutes of your time and being warm and inviting, and it can make a big difference.
Thank you, Nina. Thank you for that. Yes, it's not always something big. It's the small moments and those small acts, like you said, that mean so much when we look back. Anybody else want to share?
Yes.
Okay.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I hope everyone's well. Now that I've had some time to think about it, when I was 13 years old, I decided that I was going to enroll at a school. I'm going to apply for a scholarship, and someone told me, well, I don't know what happens when you don't get in, and I just didn't, I believed that I would. And this person was a person in authority, and I'm glad I didn't listen to that person, because my whole life changed after that. And I had a great education, and I was fortunate enough to go to Stellenbosch University and get my law degree. So at the time. As a 13-year-old, I was not like, I'm going to change the world, but I stood up for what I believed that I could do, and here we are today.
Yes. Awesome. Yeah, and today she's a candidate attorney. Yes, wonderful. Okay, let's... Oh, Barry, yes. Barry, sorry, Barry.
Thank you. When I was 15, a minister in my church told me that people who are not Christian can't go to heaven ever. And I just felt that it just couldn't be possible. How could a God make people and then just discard them? And so that started a journey that ended up 40 years later in me becoming an interfaith minister. And I had no idea at the time how that would affect my path in life, but having the courage to actually leave something that was regarded as, an intrinsic part of our growing up, an intrinsic part of our life and community, and go searching for something else. I had no idea, and I'm so grateful that he said that to me, because otherwise I wouldn't have had the life I have. Thank you.
For sharing that. Thank you so much. Okay, another question for us to look at is what do young people today need most from older generations? And what do older generations need to learn from young people? What do young people today need most from older generations? And what do older generations need to learn from young people? I'm going to share something from my own life. So, like I said, I grew up on the Cape Flats. My mother was a single mother. I was an only child. And we lived in a little one-bedroom, like tiny little council house. And my mother was never married, and after me, she essentially, her whole life revolved around me. And anyway, about 5 years ago, I was blessed to receive the opportunity to move back to Cape Town during COVID. I had lived up in Joburg worked up there for many years. Anyway, and I came back down to Cape Town, and I, as you normally do, you try and reconnect with high school buddies, etc. That only lasted a short while because I realized that people move on and we're not the same people we were in high school. But anyway, I happened to reconnect with a friend that lived like 2 houses away in the same street. And I remember one of our first conversations, she said to me, Sidley, because she was living with her grandmother at the time. And I remember her saying to me, Sidley, I used to look at you and your mother, and I used to wish that I could have that, the life that you had with your mother. And I looked at her and she said, Sidley, your mother trusted you. And there was an episode where her and I had gone out on a Saturday to the movies and, had now come home later than was expected, 2 or 3 hours later. And I remember going home and, and carrying on. And the next day, the Sunday, the grandmother comes over to our house. And I remember her I could hear them speaking in the lounge, and this grandmother was saying to my mother, you know, she was so upset because these two girls, I mean, we were teenagers, 14 years old. We had gone to the movies and we were supposed to be back at 4 and we only came back, let's say, at 6 or whatever. And, you know, and where were they? And you know, I gave her such a, you know, a hiding. Right? And I don't know what my mother said to her. I couldn't hear. But I carried on with life. And she said to me that the way she, you know, the grandmother was so hard on her compared to my mother. But the point that I want to make, and where I realized that my mother trusted me. I mean, here I was a 16-year-old, and these are the days before internet, before WhatsApp, before mobile phones. I would take these 3 taxis, go to the, you know, she knew I was writing to political prisoners. In fact, in one of the letters I'm writing, oh, my mother sends her regards, you know. And so think about it. She allowed me to go. And coming back from Robben Island, getting back to the mainland, it's not like I got back to the mainland and I could WhatsApp her and say, Mommy, I'm back on the mainland. I'm taking my next taxi, you know, get to the next drop-off point. Okay, Mommy, I'm okay, I'm safe, I'm taking the final There was no way I could do that. But she trusted me to make the right decisions, to go out into the world and think about my actions and take responsibility for my actions. So I think that as the older generation, sometimes we need to show the young people that grace of allowing them to take responsibility, to think about their actions, their words, and the consequences of those actions and words. We've got a hand up. Go. You can go.
Yes, good. Yes, good morning. This is Gur. Yeah. Thank you very much for bringing this wonderful talk to us today. And when I'm reflecting in some of your intervention, especially the last question that you just asked about the young and the older generations, I would say in my mother tongue there are 2 says that I will say here to symbolize my answers. First of all, to say a child can play a drum that can make the elder to dance. The second say is that the beard grows faster, but the eyebrows is the elder. So let me explain in both says. It means that when you are young, you need wisdom and guidance for the old generation. So you cannot do it by your own. Otherwise, it will become like a river. The river describes the meanders because of lack of guidance. So the young people must be able to understand and learn from the elders because they are supposed to host experience. So now coming to the young people, they also, the elders can also learn from the young people by availing themselves to listen to their vulnerability. And they can also learn from the young people to adjust themselves to change, because what the young generation goes through is not the same reality to what they've been going through years ago. So the older people or the elders can learn from the young to actually see the vulnerability and bring humbleness in their life, which means it's a sort of connectedness. It's a mutual exchange from the elders to the young generation, instead of talking about conflict of generation. And if we reach that place, I think we will see the picture of a beloved community. That is my answer.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ger. That was very insightful. Yes. And like you said, yes, when we listen and when we are open to listening, that will result in less conflict in general in life, as well as just understanding, you know, where the other person has a different experience to ours. My last question, what does courage look like today? For ourselves, for our communities, for our schools, for institutions, and for our country.
I'm not sure if I have the answer, but maybe a question to the question. And I know for myself, I'm reading with grave concern about the issue of foreigners in South Africa. And it worries me greatly because in the country of my birth, the same issue is arising and some horrible violence is being perpetrated in both situations. And so as Sidley's posing this question of what does courage look like, and specifically what a great conversation about in those small moments, what can each of us do? And thinking about myself, what can I do to support those foreigners in South Africa that have a right to be here? They are here legally, and yet they get clumped in with those that may be doing criminal activity or might not be here legally. And how can we see each person as a unique individual, not see just labels and what we lay on people, but treat each person as a unique individual with ideas, with hope, and with a future. So I'll just take that with me, Sidley, because as I'm talking, I want to just commit to that in this next week, that if I have an opportunity in a small moment to support someone who might be a foreigner to South Africa, that I would do that.
Thank you. Thank you, Nina.
Yeah, no, I wanted actually to come to the point, the last question, courage, what courage look like in the current situation. And I would say that in the current situation when the global community or where our communities in Africa and around the world is confronted to challenges of racism, corruption, injustice, I think the courage become a tool to fight against those weaknesses from the human being that bring a life or life in society to the oppressions. So to stand against the oppression, it needs courage. To stand against corruption, it needs courage. To stand against injustice, it needs courage. So my only answer is that courage become like I will say a medicine to heal the world in our current situation.
Thank you, Ger. Yeah. And yeah, just to add on to that, very important what you said, Ger, but also just to add on to that, and again, it comes back to not big moments or big actions, but small actions. Like, if you're a young person at school and you see someone is being bullied, do you look the other way or do you say something? It's about in your workplace. If you see, something that's happening that's not ethical, will you speak up in a meeting even when your voice is shaking? Or will you say to yourself, that doesn't affect me directly, so I don't have to say anything? Because people face the real fear of, falling out of favor, of perhaps even losing your job if you do speak up. So that's a decision that you need to make within yourself. Am I going to have the courage to speak up when I see injustice? In your community, you see something happening that doesn't quite seem right. Maybe there is resources that are meant to benefit the entire community, but only certain people are benefiting from it. Again, do you just turn away and, it doesn't affect me, here we go. Thanks, Peter, if you want to add to that.
If I may, and good morning to everybody. I am but the humble planner come film guy today. But I think just to add on to what you're saying, and in this spiritual place this morning on a Sunday where some deep reflections going on, it goes beyond the fear factor for the job. What we're seeing in commissions of inquiry, in terms of leadership that's gone fundamentally wrong, been perverted to self as opposed to service. We've seen people who have paid with their life for calling out the behavior. And using this platform, using this opportunity, and thank you for hosting us today, it's to recognize those people who've paid with their life for putting their hand up and saying this is wrong, and calling out leadership of the elders, which is showing exactly how not to do it for that next. So the fear factor that back in the day your pen pal on Robben Island was the fear factor that they'll take away my liberty, they will even take my life in so many instances. I think some of those challenges today are still prevalent, even though we live under this umbrella of a democratic era, and we should be grateful for that. The way we've used that, I think, is my own fear factor. And to say to that next generation, there are numerous examples of the pre-94, which were wicked, and post-94, which are wicked in their own way, in terms of what power can do, irrespective of race, irrespective of gender, irrespective of the faith that you follow. It's about what is it we as individuals can do for the collective, because that's the only way we get out of this together. That's my sense of it, Sidley, and again, thank you for sharing. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your thoughts, Pete. That was very, very insightful. As we close, I want to return to the letters and just affirm again that, when I wrote those letters, I didn't know they would matter. I didn't know they would be kept. I didn't know that they would be returned to me decades later. And I didn't know that they would become the foundation of my work around ethical leadership, civic responsibility, and quiet courage. And perhaps that is the lesson. We don't always know which words will matter. We don't always know which choices will travel further than we imagine. We don't always know who is watching, who is listening, and who is quietly holding on. But we do get to choose who we are becoming. And so during Youth Month, again, maybe one of the most important questions we can ask during Youth Month is not only what do young people want to become, but who are we becoming together as citizens, as communities, as families, and as a country. Because leadership doesn't begin when power is given. It begins long before that. In the ordinary moments, the unseen choices, in the acts of conscience, in the decision to care when it would be easier not to. That is where leadership begins, before power. Thank you. Thank you.
Sidley, well done.
Thank you.
Well done.